I'm Brad Thompson, and one thing you need to know about me is that I'm one of the least assertive people I know. So, like, trying to get you to stop talking and pay it is exhausting to me. So, just carry on, and we'll just talk while you're talking. Those conversations are great. I want to, again, thank you for being here, and I hope this weekend has been good for you. Some of you are truly gluttons for punishment because you spent 3 hours with me yesterday and came back, and you don't even get the buffer of having Karen up here, but you do have the buffer of Kathy this morning. So, and this is a pretty short little segment of about 30 minutes, so surely I can't do too much damage. I will tell you that about 10 years ago, Haley and I, our daughter Haley, who's 30, were presenting at a conference in Wichita, Kansas. And Karen didn't go with us that weekend. She decided she needed a little respite, so she sent Brad and Karen away and stayed at home. And Haley was co-presenting the keynote with me. And after they introduced us, Haley came up to the podium and got behind it, and she says, "My mom's name is Karen, and she's not with us. She's the smart one." So if you have any really hard questions, the smart one's sitting right over there this morning, and she loves it when I call attention to her. So this morning we're going to spend a few minutes talking about grief. And we all have experienced grief at some level. We've all experienced loss. And that's all that grief is. It's the experiencing of loss that tells us that life as we have known it is not the same. It will never be the same. That doesn't make it awful. It just means it's different. And the research tells us that when we have kids with special needs, that grief is chronic. And so what does that mean? It simply means that there are events that happen in our lives that remind us that life is not the way we expected it to be. Okay? That doesn't make it awful. It just means it's different. But if you really think about it, that's what grief does to us. That's what loss does to us, regardless of the type of loss, right? So my brother passed away 12 years ago this week. And while it's not as fresh as it was, obviously, we have a grandson, Karen and I do, that was born 4 weeks ago. And one of the things that comes to my mind pretty quickly is my brother would have loved to have met him. He would have loved to have met Weston. Now, does that stay with me long? No. Does it ruin the excitement of the birth of my first grandson? No. But it's there. That's grief. That's loss, right? So when we experience children with special needs, the way that loss looks is the loss of expectation, right? So when Haley was born almost 30 years ago, we had some generic dreams for her. We thought she would go to college. We thought she would get married. We thought she would get out of our house. We thought, that was a joke, come on, okay? You got to laugh with me or this is going to be brutal, even if it's just 30 minutes. We thought she would have us grandchildren. You know, they're generic dreams, right? And then when you get word that for a variety of reasons and diagnoses that those things are not going to happen, we grieve the loss of those. And we don't only grieve them that one time at diagnosis. There are seasons of life that happen to us where those things come about again, right? There are things like when they're second and third grade and everybody's getting invited to slumber parties but your child. And I've got to tell you, that was a bittersweet moment for me because I'm thinking, well, she's not getting invited, but if she's not getting invited, what does that mean for us? We don't have to host one, right? Come on, right? So, you know, you can find a silver lining if you look very hard, right? And those things happen on and on. You know, when she turned 16, she didn't get a driver's license. You know, we didn't make college visits. One of the hardest days, we were talking with Kathy at breakfast this morning, one of the hardest days for me personally was I'm a minister. Most ministers don't like us to, but anyway. So I do some weddings, and I officiated my son's wedding. And Haley was one of the bridesmaids. And as she walked down the aisle as a bridesmaid, it hit me that I'll never walk her down the aisle. And there was that moment of, this is not the way life is supposed to be, right? That's grief, that's loss. That moment didn't hang around long, but it hurt for a moment, right? And so I think understanding that, because one of the things that I deal with when I'm working with families is that they think they should be past it, right? I thought I had gotten to a place of acceptance of this. I thought I was okay with this. And yet, if I'm okay with this, why am I feeling this guilt, this shame, this anger, this sadness? It's because life has changed for us, probably. And we haven't adjusted to that new season yet. And we have to go through these stages that I'm going to talk to you about really briefly. And then Kathy's going to share some of her personal experience with grief and loss. And then we want to make sure that you have at least some time for questions. So there's a model out there. It's called the Stages of Adaptation, and that really just rolls off the tongue, right? But there are 4 stages, and when it comes to raising kids with special needs, I really like to talk about the first 3. The first one is survival, and how many of you have experienced that? Survival mode. How many of you would say you're stuck in chronic survival? What's the good news of survival? You survive. That's good, right? You survive. What's the bad side of survival? It's exhausting. I say that while we're surviving, we wake up in the same place every day. And I'll be honest with you, there are days when getting Haley Thompson to bedtime feels like a major accomplishment, right? But if that's every day, then we wake up in the same place the next morning, right? Well, we believe that Haley was created for a purpose. And her purpose was not thwarted by her disability or diagnosis. Her purpose comes with that. And if we're waking up every day in the same place, the chances of us pushing her toward her purpose in life are not nearly as good. But we understand some emotions that come with survival, right? We have denial, we have anxiety, we have fear. What do we do in those spaces? Well, so in denial, we don't do much. Why? Because we don't even have this, right? We're in denial. You can't work with that. But life tends to move us out of denial, right? Even if we stay in survival. And 2 of the things that we wrestle with in the survival mode is fear and anxiety. Okay, fear says, what is this? And anxiety asks the question, can I do this? Okay, well, what's the answer to that? Can you do this? How do I know? Because you're doing it, right? You're doing it. Haley's almost 30. I'm not going to tell you that every one of those days has been graceful. But at worst, we've survived every one of those days. And at best, we've had a bunch of really good days, right? We've had some really good seasons of life. And so that's the survival stage. And don't feel guilt if you feel like you're there, because we all go there, okay? And we will go there multiple times. The easiest way to explain it is in the school process. When Haley was 2, she went to what in Texas is called PPCD, and we're like, 2-year-olds aren't supposed to go to school. That's grief. And we had to learn a new system. We had to learn the PPCD system. And we grow to love the PPCD system, and then about 4.5, 5, they say, hey, she's got to go to kindergarten. We don't want to go to kindergarten. We want to stay here. We know it. We like it. And we don't know those people. And so we go to kindergarten, and where do we go in the emotional process? Back to survival, because we're having to learn our bearings again. Okay, we're having to figure it out. So don't feel guilty or shame, self-shame about that. That is reality. We're having to learn that. And we do that over and over again, right? Then we get real comfortable in grade school, and what do they tell us? You got to go to junior high. Who wants to send their kid to junior high? Right? They're kind of, if we let them live, they'll become human again in a few years, but that's not a great place for a girl with special needs, right? So, but we learn that that's okay too. All the point is that we're going to go through the survival stage many times. But the more we go through it, the faster we get to process it. So the second stage is searching. And the searching stage includes two things. It includes an inner searching and an outer searching. And we have to do the inner first. Okay, the inner search says, what does this say about me? Okay, what does it say about me that I have a daughter with special needs? That's the question. It didn't say that to me, but if it made you feel special, yeah, great. It didn't make me feel special. It made me ask, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Most, if we're gender typical, most moms at this stage will feel guilt. What did I do wrong? What did I not do right? Most dads will feel shame, because we're kind of driven by what we do. And when we start hearing the things that our kids won't do, that produces shame in us. Okay, well, what do we do with that? We have to process it. The truth is, if you were with us yesterday, you heard us bang on staying in your truth. The truth about this is that Haley's diagnosis says nothing about me. What I do with her and for her in my home and in my life says everything about me. So if I'm being faithful to her where she's at, then there is nothing to feel guilty about or ashamed about. Okay?
Excuse me, but when you said special, I think what she meant was you probably felt crazy, like you didn't know what you meant. Oh my God, what am I supposed to do?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I was told a lot that, you must be really special
Oh,
because
yeah.
God was not.
Right. Now, if you define it as crazy, yes, I feel that way. If you define it as I feel special, and yes, and yes, people have told me that, and I put that in the category of people telling me things because silence is too painful for them, and they don't know what else to say. I'm not special. Haley is.
Yes.
I'm not. I'm just being a steward, trying to be. So then the second, after I can kind of get past what does this say about me, it gets to now what do we do about this? That's outer searching. Okay, and this is where, especially if you're younger and you find yourself in this stage, you become your doctors and your teachers and your therapists' worst nightmare. Okay, because you're the ones that are up at 3 o'clock in the morning Googling resources. Okay, and I can tell by the look on your face who you are. And one of the things, and I'm thankful for the passion and the commitment, but one of the things we have to remember is that I only have one Haley. My doctor and my teacher and my therapist have 10s and 20s and hundreds of them. And so they don't have the time. And the fact that you found something on some obscure website that they don't know about doesn't make them less committed. They don't have the time you have. And they also know some things that we don't know. And so some of the things that we're looking at that sound awesome, there's a reason that they won't do them. It's because they know some things that we don't know. Okay. Now, that doesn't make it wrong to bring it up to them. but build the space to have a conversation about it. So we have these inner and outer searching. And in the outer searching is where we will find anger and depression a lot of times. Anything wrong with anger?
No, of course not.
No, anger's a God-given thing, so it can't be wrong. But what do we do with it?
What we do with it is that we can write about it. We can use art. We can draw art. We can scribble it on paper.
Yeah, we can do a lot of things with it. Unfortunately, anger often isolates us. Okay? When we get angry and use it, when we use that energy, it's the most energy-producing emotion we have, and that's a great thing. But if we're not careful, it pushes people away. And the greatest challenge to the emotional well-being of a caregiver is isolation. Okay? And so just think about, if you know angry people, how much distance do you keep? Right? There's a reason that people don't build homes near volcanoes. Right? They don't go off all that often, but when they do, right? And it's easy to become known as that parent, right? That caregiver. So the third place, and it's where we want to get, is the settled in stage. And the settled in stage is where we find hope and acceptance. That I'll tell you to this day that if life could be different for Haley, I would take it. But at this point in her life, it's because it would be better for her and not us. Okay? Yes, I would love for her to know the experience of having her own life, having her own family, having me some more grandchildren. It gets to be about me sometimes, right? All of those things, I would love for her to have that. But I'm okay with her now where she is. The settled in stage means I'm not up at 3 o'clock Googling for the latest resource because I'm okay with her. And so I can now rest where she's at. Okay? And that gives me hope because she's okay. Right? She's okay exactly the way she is. It's not laziness. It's that she's okay. If we find something that makes her life better, certainly. But her life's fine as it is. Does that make sense? Now, what's the greatest challenger to that settled in hope acceptance stage? Change. Absolutely. Changes, we call them seasons of life. Every time that season changes, we have to reorient ourselves. And we will go back through the process. And just because you find yourself back at survival mode trying to figure out what this stage means, it doesn't mean you haven't accepted her. It just means that you're having to figure out a new routine of life. Okay? And we're figuring out the current at this point. All right? And the beauty of having done this for 30 years, and some of you have kids older than that, is that we've done it enough times that we don't stay in survival very long anymore. Okay? We get back to it pretty quickly. Okay? So, any questions about that? I want Kathy to get to. Yeah.
I'm just going to keep it real short and then let them have questions because
Great.
we're over time. I wanted to bring a little bit of personal perspective to Brad's talk about grief today and the process that we all go through. One thing that I learned this morning is that there are those moments while your children are here that I just looked at as challenging moments, and then you deal with them and go on and go, oh, I never realized that it was actually a grief moment. But my I wanted to bring a little bit of personal perspective because I've walked this grief road for a little bit of time now. For those of you who don't know me, I have 4 boys, and my second oldest son was killed in a car accident while he was at college in 2005. That was my first introduction to grief. I didn't handle it real well the first time, but I still got through the stages. And I really couldn't understand in the beginning why it just wasn't a straight road. Because everything in life, I think, oh, it's like you just make one step after another and you keep building on that, and then you get to a moment where it's like, oh, okay, we're done with this, we're going to file it away. Grief is definitely not like that. So in 2013, my LGS son, Matthew, he passed away from SUDEP. And that was my second lesson with grief. I chose to do it completely different. I made a conscious decision to not deal with grief the way I did the first time. And I learned a lot of lessons in that. And what I want to impart to you is basically my thing that the biggest lesson that I learned was that grief is not that straight road. Grief is filled with hills, valleys, curves. One moment you're like, oh, I got this, I'm good. You're on this autopilot and you're thinking, okay, I can do the rest of my life and this is great. And then all of a sudden a memory or something little will spark you, or you'll see something that hits you completely unexpectedly. And then you find yourself back in that very first moment. And you go, why? Why am I back here? But, you know, I have learned that it is, if you allow yourself to travel that road and give yourself some grace, you know, give yourself some room for knowing that you're doing a fantastic job. And grief is huge in this walk that we're all doing. And that it is survivable. And it is possible to carry on their light even after you know, your children are, most of our children are still with us, but even if you suffer that huge loss that is unexpected and that none of us want that outcome, it is still possible to have a positive outcome to that and to be a light in the road of grief. So grief doesn't have to be dark. That's what I want to leave you with, is that, you know, grief doesn't have to be dark. It doesn't have to be negative, but allow yourself the space and the grace to yourself to just travel that road as best you can. And I'm going to kind of cut it there because we're over time, but I do want to open. I want you guys to have a chance to ask questions to Brad and I, and because I think it's a conversation that we don't get to have. A lot of people don't understand, and it's important to know that it's okay. It's okay. It's part of the walk. So I want to open it up to all of you. If you want to ask questions, feel free. Brad and I are here, and in the LGS community, I am always available to all of you. Anyway, reach out to me, Facebook, ask my phone number, I don't care. Text me, call me. I am available to have that conversation, to reassure you. If I can do this twice, you guys can do this walk. I want to give you the confidence that it's possible and to do it positively. I don't think I can pass the mic. I can't go past here, so.
Well, I used to be on stage, and I know how to project.
Good, yay.
I'm Caroline McKinnon. I'm Sophie's mom, and I became a certified grief recovery specialist.
Awesome.
There is such a thing as recovery from grief, and this has been an excellent presentation. Thank you both. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't know I was supposed to grieve this loss, and I kept it to myself, and it just ate away at me. It's like a cancer, you know? And I had some other losses that all came together, too many at one time, and I was referred to the grief recovery method, which is a very specific step method on how to process your grief. So we know that we have it, we know that it's normal, but what we don't know often is how to do it. You cannot do it alone. Thank you for offering to be a resource. You can Google how to handle grief, so you don't have to do that at 3 a.m. But find some way of sharing that with a grief recovery specialist or something along those lines. Some people find it through personal faith. Thank you for mentioning that. That doesn't work for everybody. The anger was something that drove me for a while. Sometimes we eat at our grief. Sometimes we just blank out through drugs and alcohol. because of all
Yes.
the variables that make our kids unique. I'm a better person now because I've had to learn how to handle life. Thank you for everything you've done. Everybody here is a saint. You are.
Can I just say something too? Grief is not textbook. There is no right or wrong. There isn't. The only key that I found is I see a lot of times we get stuck. And I think we feel guilty because we think we deserve the pain of grief. But honestly, if you can get past that and realize, and the way that what helped me get past that was I made a promise to my son the day he died. And I told him that I would laugh and sing and honor his life until we see each other again. I'm going to cry. But so it is possible to, it's not textbook, so don't be hard on yourself. But yeah, good point. Thank you. Go ahead.
Just very quickly, from all the fathers here, want to wish all the mothers here a very happy Mother's Day.
Aw, thank you.
I just wanted to speak to, you made a comment that, not understanding, like when somebody says they feel special as a parent because they have a special child. I'm with you on, that I also feel that we're all created with purpose. And I know that my son, has a purpose. But I also had to come to a point of embracing my purpose in that now that this is my purpose too. And it shaped my life. There was like an acceptance there. And that like bumped me up a step, definitely. And I would,
But
just this whole beautiful part of my life, the LGS family would not be there.
Right.
If it would have gone away when I wished it away.
Yeah.
What I tell people all the time is that I've gotten to meet, because Haley is who she is, I've gotten to meet some of the most incredible people in the world.
Yeah.
And y'all are some of them. And so I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
While that I would have missed you if I'd had two typically developing kids.
Sure.
I just would have. It wouldn't have been because I'm better or worse. It's just I would have missed you. The other thing that I would say is that don't lose your identity.
Yeah.
As don't become Haley's mom. Or
That's
Haley's
hard.
dad. That well, and some of that's natural, but I'm still Brad.
Yep.
And I have to still live into that. Okay, and that's important that you don't lose your identity. Yes, ma'am.
So I can relate to the link up there. I don't know if you guys filtered. So in December I had an issue and I cried. But I wanted to leave the whole thing
Aw.
because I lost my identity. And it's okay to have caregiver burnout. And it's okay to get help. And that's what I had to find out, that I wasn't crazy. That I needed to find me again because I got lost in this. And that he is special and he's mine and I love him dearly. But I had to find me first. So I can relate to
Yeah. It is. That's why we spend a lot of time yesterday talking about balance, and that this is a long journey. And if your kids are young, you're barely started, and that's not a pain. I don't want that to be a painful, disappointing, pessimistic thing. It's Karen's words are, "I want to see Haley to the finish line, and she will not do that if she doesn't take care of herself first." There's a reason why when you get on the airplane, they say put the oxygen mask on you first.
Yeah.
It's because if you don't survive, you can't help your children. Right?
So I see this like real big division between the parents of much younger children and the parents of much older children. And my son is just 8, but we're starting to transition past that frantic, desperate stage of early development. And I don't think it's wrong. A lot of the parents of older kids are like, oh, don't stress out and do so many therapies. Don't kill yourself going to, do all that. Don't think about cures and treatments. Just accept it. I don't think that's the best advice. I think that it's okay to try as hard as you can because later on that'll help with your acceptance because you did everything you could do.
can I answer to that? I was just having a conversation yesterday with somebody, and I believe that you really do need to make those decisions. I think that we're here with our children to make those difficult decisions and give them the best and put the best things that we can in front of them so that they can be their ultimate best. And if you make those decisions in love, you can't go wrong. So whatever you decide, however much energy you want to put in that, I believe we're here to, like, yes, you know, put every prevention in place, put, you know, give them the best of this, let them, you know, experience what it is that you think is best for them. But ultimately, if you make all your decisions out of love, you're going to be fine. Can't make a wrong one.
Yeah,
So
I would say that I'm making those decisions for her in my case.
Yeah.
That I want her to have the best life possible, and so if there's a cure, of course I want that for her best life possible. But I want to do that from a place of acceptance that I love her just the way she is. It's kind of two
Absolutely.
different questions.
It is.
Make
It
sense?
can be, people that, like, for instance, me, I have a son with a genetic change, and I believe in a cure. I know we're gonna have a cure, but I get some feedback from that that's negative. Oh, you don't love your child for who he is.
Yeah.
Of course I do.
No, that's not
But
the
I
point.
want
we can be hopeful.
I want him
We can be real
to
hopeful.
live a life. I want him to make it through childhood.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's not the point of not accepting.
Yeah.
It's I want the best life
It's hard to
possible for
decipher
him.
that, though.
Well, yeah, because it's not a straight line.
Yeah.
It's a crooked line. And yeah, so but you're fine. Good. Right where you are. You're good.
My name is Sophie, and I just wanted to say about yesterday to when I was standing and speaking up for the people who can't talk. I'm proud to have spoken up and say to the ones who can't talk, I'm proud to say that everyone can actually live independently, but with the help that they need. They can go by getting a lot of help with, by Regional Center, Golden Gate Regional. That's how my mom was able to actually have the help in being a lot of,
You're right. Thank you.
I was just gonna say, I think it's really
Yeah.
important to remember too, social media was a really hard driver in my grief because I compared my son and him not being healthy. And I've met several families here this weekend that say the only social media they're doing is to get on the Facebook page for the LGS group. And I know, I think it's incredibly important if you're not there and you're not willing to accept where your child is, maybe that's where you start and you take down pieces of that life that allows you to compare, because it really does do a number to what you think your child can do. But now that I have accepted it, I share the very best and funniest parts about my son. And
Yes.
humor, right?
Yes.
All of the funny things. But I'm able to accept exactly who he is, and so does the world around me. But I know there's people like him that without this group, there was never a person for how many years, Ken?
Let's at least 10 years or so, I wanna say.
That she never knew
Yeah.
another family. And so
Yeah.
this group really allows you to have that grace that Kathy was talking about. And I think that that's a huge driver to allow yourself that grace. You're not doing anything wrong, even though some days it feels like all you can do is survive.
Yeah.
But how much
And-
of that is normal parenting too?
Oh, absolutely,
I mean,
absolutely. And I think that's, anything,
On that note,
or anything.
we're really over time, guys. I hate to cut it, but I'd be happy, and I'm sure Brad would be happy to have conversations with you at any moment, at any time. So thank you for coming, and we have to let the next session begin because we're way over time, people. Thank you.